All right, what's up, everyone? It's Zach, and today I'm here with a very special guest. I am joined by Crystal Jackson. Crystal, how are you doing tonight?
I am wonderful. I am wonderful and staying warm.
I love that. That's super important now that the weather's getting a little chilly around here.
Yes, it is.
Yes, awesome. So, Crystal, it's actually really cool. If you've been following along with the podcast, Crystal is actually the sister of a recent podcast guest, Bernard Jackson. So they are siblings, and that is how Crystal and I have got connected. She heard the podcast that I did with Bernard, and she wanted to get in touch, and here we are having her on. So Crystal is an educator, very passionate about education, communication, and just seems to have quite a few passions. So that's a little bit about Crystal and how the two of us got connected. But Crystal, do you mind kind of giving a little bit about your background and what you do these days?
All righty. And I thank you, Zach, first and foremost, for having me on.
Of
And
course.
my background, ooh wee, it's quite extensive. My background is in education. I majored in communication broadcast arts, and my minor is English, something that I've done for the last 20, almost 28 years now. I've served as an English teacher in the Metro Detroit area. And I love them both. I enjoy both, but it is getting that time where it's almost near for me to retire from education. But I do still love my voice work. I love that, and I've done extensive work when it comes to voice work as well.
Okay, perfect. And now, Crystal, when you say like voice work, like what specifically are you referring to?
Well, I started at Central Michigan University.
Fire
I
up
worked,
chips?
yes, fire up chips, Chippewa pride.
I love it. That's where
I
I graduated from.
okay, all right. And there I ran the campus radio station on
Okay.
Saturdays when we were having football games. I was at the radio station. I worked there for a little while, but then classes demanded me to do otherwise. And then I have worked as an intern at Fox 2 under one of the old news anchors that's no longer there. He's retired, Mr. Stan Childress.
Hmm.
I've done work at Specs Howard School of Broadcasting under the direction of Gerald McBride and Randy Z. That's where I did demo work. I have done all kinds of recordings, voice recordings. I've served as an MC when we had two mayoral candidates for the city of Detroit. I was the MC for that. I've
Okay.
done recording for the Detroit Youth Choir. I have done recording for the blind at Wayne State University. And I was even told by one of the greats at Motown Museum that my voice was very soothing. And he's like, well, why don't you use your voice for something else? And this voice has emceed, broadcast, recorded, talked, read stories. I've done it. So I have the nickname The Voice, but I changed it a little bit to The Voice One because I was the first one years ago. Um, just talking. My mother stated that I started talking when I was about 18 months old. So
Wow.
that's where the voice comes from.
Okay. I love it.
Yes.
And it's really funny that you mentioned the voice because definitely like just for anyone listening, the first time that Crystal and I got in contact, Crystal called me and I was at work, so she left me a message and I was listening to the voicemail. I was like, wow, like Crystal has like a very just like great voice. It sounds like a great radio kind of television voice, very soothing. Like you mentioned, it just sounded so just like it was just very pleasant to and I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably thinking the same thing. Like, has a really, really nice voice. So I love that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of
Thank you.
course. Yeah, of course. So, all this work that you just mentioned, Crystal, it is very, I guess you could say, diverse with different things like radio, MC, different broadcasting opportunities. So, opportunities present themselves to you? Were those things that it was right place, right time, or did you, have to use a lot of like network and connections to get to those opportunities?
I think for me, Zach, some of them were networking, some of
Okay.
them were opportunities for me, some of them were being at the right place at the right time. Some of them extended through coursework that I had taken in broadcasting communication arts,
Okay.
and some of them were just classes that I was taking.
Mm. Okay. That makes sense. It sounds like it's a good variety of different ways to kind of get your into that opportunity, but it sounds like, once you kind of found one, you just started running with it and really found a passion for doing that voice work.
Yes, 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 yes.
I love it. Okay. And now, are you currently like actively doing any voice work, or is it more so just like if an opportunity comes up, then you'll do it, but right now you're kind of just focusing on your role as an educator?
I'm focusing on my role as an educator and I'm focusing on voice work.
Okay.
I'm interested in podcasting, possibly going back into radio.
Okay.
Television is something I have not dived into as of yet.
Okay.
And it's just so much that one can do with a voice.
Right.
Being an educator, I could read stories for little children via Zoom or Google Meet. It's just a lot to do with one's voice. I can do recordings. I did recordings when Detroit held the Super Bowl. I did some
Okay.
voicemail recordings for people in business recordings. This voice has done so much work, so I'm just ready to put it back to work.
Okay. Awesome. And through all the work that you've done with your voice, do you have like a favorite or most memorable experience?
Hmm. All memorable for me just
Okay.
to be able to be the voice. I think one of my colleagues, he just kind of teased me years ago when we were having some type of event at one of the high schools. And he's like, how do you feel when you go up on stage and you pick up a mic and you open your mouth and the students start cheering? I had never thought anything of it. And I think because I hear my voice every day. I'm used to it. I don't hear
Mm-hmm.
what others hear in my voice. So I just kind of looked at him and says, "Well, I don't know. I mean, that's something I had never thought about."
Hmm. That is an interesting thing to think about. Like since you do hear your voice all the time, it just kind of like you're almost like immune to it. Like it doesn't really stand out to you because it's your voice and you're just used to it.
Exactly. I'm just used to
Okay.
it.
Yeah. So that kind of made me think of something when you're kind of mentioning, like, getting on stage and, you taking the microphone. So, in your opportunities that you've had with voice work, it sounds like maybe some of them have been like live events where you're in front of a crowd and you're maybe being like an MC. And then it sounds like some might have been like when you're doing radio, maybe you're like in a studio and no one's really seeing you, or watching you, but they're hearing your voice. Is it a different experience whether people can actually see you or not, or does it not really matter too much to you?
For me, it really does not matter
Okay.
too much for me. I've done both,
Mm-hmm.
and I think like one of the first times I had to go on stage, I was going to faint and fall
Okay.
out, but I didn't because the lighting was so bright. You really don't even see the audience. I didn't even see
Okay.
that. I just saw bright lights, and I'm like, how can I even remotely be afraid because I can't see the people? All I see
Right.
is bright lights. Um, Once you get up there and you start talking, it's okay. And that's something that I have instructed communication broadcast arts with many high school students and youth in the city in the Metro Detroit area. And I teach them every day that stage fright is normal. Some of
Yeah.
your most prominent people experience stage fright. So if I have any jitters, by the time I get a sentence or two in, I'm okay. I'm generally
Okay.
okay. Yes.
Okay. That's really good to know because I think that like yeah, like I think all of us have probably been in an experience, whether it was at a job or in school, where you have to give a presentation or speak in front of your class or your coworkers, audience, whatever, and you just feel that stage fright. And just I think to realize that that's normal and it's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you know there's something wrong with you or anything. It's normal to have those little jitters, but I think like you said, Crystal, it's once you get going, then it'll usually feel a little easier and you'll probably be a little more comfortable up there.
Yes, it's not bad once you get up there. Not that
Definitely.
bad.
So that kind of leads to the question of like if anyone listening to this, podcast between us is a little more nervous or gets stage fright when giving presentations or speaking in front of groups, do you have any advice or any tips for how they might be able to make it through that situation or overcome maybe that initial fear?
Well, I just tell them to take a deep breath,
Okay.
do know that their favorite musicians, their favorite actors and actresses, they all experience stage fright. And I explain to students many times that even famous people, sometimes we're sitting and we're waiting for a concert, for example, and it's taking them forever to come out on stage. And we're like, where is so and so? We're cheering, where is so and
Right.
so? Sometimes they're experiencing stage fright.
Mm.
So you just have to take a deep breath. I told them sometimes many of the performers go back and pray because you never know what that audience is going to do.
Yeah.
And your audience is always going to be a determining factor. And you always just, center yourself. Don't always give a person eye contact. You could look at different fixtures within a room to help
Mm.
calm oneself when experiencing stage fright. So I'm not going to teach the whole class here on the podcast tonight.
No, I appreciate those tips though. I think that, yeah, I have been pretty fortunate and lucky to not have too many struggles when it comes to presenting or speaking in front of groups. I've kind of always enjoyed it. I think that any, like, jitters that most people experience, for me, it turns into, like, adrenaline where I just get, like, really excited and amped up to do it, and even, like, this podcast, I feel like I get that excitement, but I definitely can understand how it can be nerve-wracking, and I think, like, a lot of people I know maybe struggle with, kind of speeding up their speaking more than they want to, right? Like, I think back to class presentations where you're supposed to present for, like, 15 minutes, and, some of my peers would speak so quickly, they're done in, like, 5 minutes. So I think that that's definitely one of those, like, nervous habits. Are there any, like, nervous habits that you've experienced or that, like, you think are pretty common when it comes to speaking in front of people?
For me, not too many. Not
Okay.
too many. I
Yeah.
mean, things just kind of flow for me. It's kind of like I would say it's a God given gift for me.
Yeah.
I really don't run into many of the challenges that others may experience when it comes to this. It
Mhm.
just flows naturally for me.
Okay. Awesome. And now I know you kinda mentioned, like, you pretty much started talking at a young age, and that's when the voice really established itself. But was there any other moments in your life or any, like, individuals, whether, like, personally or, like, you looked up to that helped you kinda get into, just voice work and, learning more about it?
I think, and I'm going to tell my age here, one of my favorites was Walter Cronkite,
Okay. Yeah.
all news anchor. And I used to love the way he ended his day. And say, for instance, if he were on tonight, he'd be like, it's Sunday, October 2nd, and he would say, good night. I
Yeah.
loved Walter Cronkite, and I had the opportunity to meet Mort Krim. Those were two of my favorites. And I just kind of like, yes, yes, I want to do like they're doing. And I had one of my former professors that was coaching me, Dr. William Boyce at Wayne State University. Those were three of my go-tos who promoted me and really got me into really having a passion for the industry.
Okay. So it sounds like the passion that you've had is been one that you've had for quite a while then.
Yes, since I was a little child in elementary school.
Awesome. And now something that kind of comes up in this podcast a lot is like when you have a passion, sometimes people say, don't do your passion for work because that takes the passion and the fun out of it and it just becomes a job. Have you ever experienced that or even like in the various roles that you've had with your voice work? Like, are you still genuinely just as passionate about every role and it's just still that same passion that you've had since you've been young?
I think I have passion for it and I love it. I think where the passion sometimes may have gotten stolen from me is sometimes you have to follow a school's curriculum and their
Mm,
lead of how they want it done. And sometimes, I kind of wanted to flow my way with it because I was used to doing it, just naturally, but you have to follow your curriculum of your building. And sometimes I was like, well, sometimes we need to kind of do this with it, or I want to tweak it like this. But other than that, I loved it. And
okay.
I was blessed with it. I mean, I really
Yeah.
implemented it when it came to reading because
Hmm.
a lot of people just read what's in black and white, the text from a book. Well, I had to teach students how to add character, how to add intonation, and add some tone to the voice, to the characters in the text. in order to bring that book alive. And that's how I got students to become more engaged in reading. I was like voice actress, in which they call me a voice actress as well. So you have to add life to your characters to make it more interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I think that, just if we think about maybe times that someone's read to us or even when we're reading a book by ourselves, like when you give that voice and, give that personality to the characters, it just makes such a difference versus just like reading it very dry and blandly.
Yes.
Okay. And now you mentioned kind of like that piece where you have like a curriculum that you have to follow and everything. And I don't want to, say that having curriculums or anything that like school structure is bad or anything, but like in those moments where maybe you think like, "Ah, like, there's another way we could go about it." Do you think that, like, having to follow the curriculum can be limiting, or do you think, like, while it might be a little frustrating at times, like, it makes sense and that is, like, it's a good system to have?
Well, it's a good system to have because you have to stay organized.
Mhm.
You have to have structure in anything that one does. But sometimes you just want to have a little fun.
Yeah.
And curriculum is not written to have fun; it's written to instruct. And sometimes I just wanted to have fun with the voice.
Okay. Gotcha. So it's, like, finding that balance between, like, having fun, but still following that structure that you have to.
Yes, most definitely.
Okay. And now whether it's, your role as an educator now or throughout your career, has there been, like, a specific age range that you focused on or worked with?
I have taught from kindergarten to collegiate. I've taught from
Okay.
kindergarten to little bitty babies, and we sit on the floor and finger paint. And then I've served as an adjunct professor. So I've done, like I stated, from kindergarten to the collegiate level.
Okay. Do you have a favorite population that you've worked with or age group?
I have been with the high schoolers, secondary ed, most of my life. They
Okay.
have been a very rewarding crew because I love to see the growth. They come in as freshmen, kind of hormonally out of control, but where to see where some of them are today as productive citizens and society, I love it. I just love the growth.
That is really cool because I feel like even thinking back to when I was in high school and stuff, like, freshman year to senior year was night and day differences in just growth and maturity. And I think that'd be really cool to be able to see and kind of chart that progress that your students have.
Yes. So that is something that is rewarding
Yeah,
on the educational side as an educator to look and see students that somebody listened, somebody grew, someone is productive.
definitely. And now we've talked kind of about how your background with, the voice, the nickname The Voice, and your voice work and how you got into it. What led you to being an educator?
Well, what led me to be an educator? I grew up with educators,
Okay.
and both my parents are educators and hold doctorate degrees, and my mother's also a doctor of naturopathic medicine, natural
Okay.
medicine as well. So
Yeah.
I grew up with educators, not a bad profession to be in, and discussing with them and getting their parental advice. They said
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with being an educator. It was quite difficult finding jobs in communication broadcast arts, and so I had to take a step out a little bit away from the broadcasting industry and field and find a job. I had bills to pay. I had things that I wanted to do in life. So I went back to school and got some teacher certification, and I actually became an actual educator. And I have done that now for 28 years now.
Okay. So, clearly you have this passion for, um, broadcasting and cinematic arts, and it sounds like you also have a passion for educating as well. Would you say that's true, or like would your passion for broadcasting be greater than your passion for educating?
Both of them are a deep passion of
Okay.
mine. Both.
Okay.
I mean, to do almost 30 years in education,
Yeah.
you have to have a passion for it.
Right.
I love it. I love what I do. I love my students. I'm just there, getting ready
Okay.
to go in tomorrow to be with my seniors, and I love them, and I've earned that nickname, the Voice, or some call me Mama J, and I love both. I love
Yeah.
them both. Yes.
Okay, perfect. The reason that I asked that, Crystal, is because I know that you're kind of saying, like, after you graduated, it was maybe a little difficult to find jobs in broadcasting cinematic arts, and, you had bills and things, and you had to, be responsible to make those payments and to, be an adult, if you will. So that's when you went into education and stuff. So I just want to see if that was something that was always a passion, or if it was just like, I have to pay my bills somehow, why not go into teaching?
I think it was a passion for me because ever since
Okay.
what first or second grade in Detroit Public Schools, service girls and future teachers, and I
Okay.
was a member of that program to be a future teacher. So
Okay.
it was something that had been instilled in me long ago in elementary, and it's just both are a passion for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. And then in your teaching career, your career as an educator, have you always or generally taught things along the lines of like communication or broadcasting, or have you taught like various different subjects?
As an educator for almost 30 years, I've taught almost various subjects. I mean, it depends on where one was needed,
Mm-hmm.
depending on where there was a shortage. I remember one year I ended up as a substitute teacher somewhere teaching math, and
Okay.
my background is English and broadcasting.
Yeah.
So wherever needed, that's where I
Okay.
have been. I've taught a
Gotcha.
lot of different subjects.
Okay. Gotcha. And now, out of curiosity, so thinking back, like, the last few years, um, more so, when the start of the pandemic happened and a lot of schools went virtual and things like that, what was that like for you as an educator? Was that like a big adjustment, or was that tougher to really help, or feel like you're helping your students, or was that something that still worked pretty well for you personally as an educator?
Hooey, going from a building to virtual,
Mhm.
that the nation does not realize at all what educators went through.
Mm,
That was one of the most challenging transitions ever
okay.
in the history of education ever.
Yeah.
And I have my own program, the Educational Defense Team, my own business. I was working with seniors, and they had to finish this program in order to graduate. So
Okay.
I had to transition a whole senior program from a building to an online platform. And we were doing in the building detailed research, detailed math projects, elective projects, and they had to be organized, loaded to templates. They had to actually defend at the end of the year, and to transition all of that virtually, no one knows. And all the rubrics and everything had to be coded through
Yeah.
Excel spreadsheets. I had to pay people to come in and help out. It was quite challenging going virtual. Quite
Okay.
challenging. That was the most challenging year, I think, for most educators in the nation. And that's why we are almost at a deficit of about 700,000 who have walked away from the field.
Wow. I didn't realize that there was that much of a deficit now.
Yeah, so there is a major, massive teacher shortage. It is an educational shortage of educators in our nation.
And you would say that, like, I mean, I'm sure, you don't have like the exact statistics off the top of your head, but like you think a decent amount of that shortage has come from just the transitions of having to go virtual and just how stressful and difficult that was.
It was quite difficult to have
Okay.
children sit. You're at home
Mhm.
and you're trying to make them actually sit in front of a camera,
Yeah.
and they could actually either learn how to mute the teacher or they would get up and do something else. And I, having seniors, some of my seniors had to take on the responsibility of becoming the adult of the house.
Sure.
They may have lost parents, they may have lost grandparents or whomever, and they had to go to work and be the primary income person, or they had to help take care of younger siblings.
Right.
People really do not understand the dynamics of what transition when we went virtual. It
Yeah.
nothing like one thinks. It was not a good morning, boys and girls. Log into the computer, turn on your cameras, and let's go from here. It was very
Mhm.
challenging, very, very challenging.
Now, do you feel like from the start of going the transition to virtual when it was very challenging, did it ever get easier or even better for you, or was it always, like, just, you know of course, you maybe get a little more comfortable, know, the process a little more, but was it always still challenging, or did it ever get any better or easier?
It got a little better as we started trying to work some things out and figure some things out and know which buttons to push and how to transition the students from the main part of the room in Zoom to the breakout room of Zoom. It's
Yeah.
just a lot we had to learn as educators in
Mhm.
order to educate our students. And we
Yeah.
were learning in the process of trying to instruct. So it got a little bit better, but I would never want to go back to virtual instruction. I,
Okay.
prior to the pandemic, oh, it would be nice to be in Hawaii and teach from Hawaii or
Yeah.
another part of the country. No, just put me in a classroom, in a building, in a school. I'm good. I'm good
Okay.
to be able to be
Gotcha.
right there with my students.
Now, kind of flipping the perspective a little bit, do you know, at least for your students, Crystal, like, did they feel kind of the same, just difficulties with the transition to virtual, or did your students seem to enjoy it, or was it not the same to them? Did you get any feedback or anything?
It was different feedback. Some students enjoyed it. Some
Okay.
students said they learned more being at home. Others said they learned more being at school. I
Mm,
think a lot had to do with one's home environment.
sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I think the home environment can definitely make or break kind
Hmm.
of how that experience could have been.
Exactly. So some love that.
Okay. Got it. And, just out of curiosity, when it comes to education, just the general topic of education and maybe curriculums and everything, do you think that the current way that we educate and, the current curriculums that we have in place, do you think that they are be, or do you think that there, should be maybe changes, or just like what are your thoughts on that?
Interestingly, we were just looking last week at the educational structure in the United States versus some other countries.
Right.
And the question came to the table as to whether there needs to be a paradigm shift in education, especially here in the United States. Having taught almost 30 years now, there is a definite transition and difference in education. Technology and cell phones and
Mhm.
social media have really become a challenge for educators to actually educate our children. And they are into the high speed internet. They're not into reading textbooks like we once were.
Right.
Almost like giving us going back to rotary dial phones. Who has a rotary dial phone in 2022?
Right.
So to come in a classroom today and tell the kids, let's take out the books and turn to page so and so, they're just looking like, are you serious?
Mhm.
And they're going to their Instagram, Facebook feeds, and they take their little finger and here you spinning like out of control. But you actually
Right.
want me to sit here and open a book and read in slow motion. Are you serious? There's no audio to this. There's no pictures to this, no graphics. And so if they could just load education to a social media feed, I think we would do better.
Yeah.
It would be different.
That's a really interesting concept, to like a social media feed. Like, I think that, yeah, I mean, I love my phone and I'm probably a little more reliant on it than I should be, but I think that that's a really good point that even for me, thinking back to when I was, a student, in elementary, middle school, even high school, and then like thinking about people who are in those age ranges now, it seems like the whole life and, technology and the advancements are so different, and just I can't even imagine what it would be like to be, in 5th grade in 2022. Like, it just seems like it'd be such a different experience than what I experienced.
Education is quite different. The beginning teacher to the way it is today. And because I still work with student teachers coming into the profession, some of it find it challenging becoming a teacher. And they're like, how do you have you done this all these almost 30 years? It was quite different when I began as a student teacher to the
Okay.
way it is today. I mean, It's just a lot to deal with in today's society. We are dealing with the issue of course, the pandemic.
Mhm.
You're looking at mental health issues. You're looking at young people now having to be the adult in the household. Then we have vaping going on now. It's just so much that's different today than it
Yeah.
was years ago.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Just yeah, there's just so many differences, and it's a lot to juggle, and for educators, I mean, I can't say from firsthand experience, but it seems like, maybe as an educator, you're almost asked to wear more hats than just being a teacher. If a student is maybe going through a difficult home life situation, you might have to put on the cap of almost like a counselor or a social worker to kind of see if there's ways that you can help while they're in the classroom, even if there's things outside of the classroom that are affecting their education. And, um, like you mentioned some other things just going on with the pandemic, having to be a support system for students who are struggling or maybe having to step up and, like you said, be kind of like go to work and take on that extra responsibility.
Hmm. And we, as educators, to a certain extent, yes, we do help our students, but we do
Hmm.
have school social workers and
Yep.
their counselors. We just ask them to, if they're comfortable with telling us, we can direct them to the right source of support.
Yeah.
Is what we do as teachers.
Okay, that makes sense. And Crystal, something that you said that kind of stuck out to me was just the idea of mental health. And on the podcast, I talked to a lot of guests about mental health and just the importance of taking care of our mental health, having conversations about it.
Hmm.
Um, just out of curiosity, from your vast experience in education and as an educator, do you think kind of like conversations and student mental health has changed or shifted from like when you first started teaching to now?
Most definitely. I think it has just changed in society in
Okay.
more awareness of it. There's not as much denying of the support that's needed and necessary.
Mhm.
And a lot of things are going on in society now where the terminology, mental health, mental illness, he had a mental problem, all of it is coming forth now. And I mean, this whole situation has just thrown a new light on society in general, things that we kind of ignored or turned our backs on. It's now becoming more discussed and more open now. And some of the schools are bringing in, support facilities and support personnel to come and support the staff and students
Mhm.
going through this actual crisis when it the mental health issue.
Yeah, and I think that's really awesome to hear that schools are kind of maybe taking a little more of an active role in helping students with their mental health, whether it's providing resources or just support. Because I think that yeah, I mean a lot going on in the world, and it can be tough on anyone, especially I think of people who are still kids who are still growing and developing and just figuring out life in general. It can feel like even more at that age.
Hmm. And watching the news, it's impacting adults as well.
Mhm.
And it's just something that has just really come more so to light, that it's okay if one has maybe a problem or whatever to let someone know so that
Yeah.
you can be directed to get some support or help. It used to be kind of hush hush. You don't tell anybody if you're having a problem, you just kind of keep it to yourself. But those
Mhm.
days are kind of over with in today's society now. Let someone know so that one can get support.
Exactly. It's so important too. And I think again, like having this conversation we're having right now, Crystal, I think it's important because maybe someone listening to this is maybe experiencing some hardships or, struggling a little bit and just hearing like it's okay to not be okay or to struggle and just to tell someone a professional, a family member, a friend, and those individuals can help you get support or resources, and it's nothing that's wrong with you. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just we live in a world that things are very tough, and it's okay to need that extra support at times.
Exactly. And some friends and I, we do wellness checks on one another. Make sure everybody's
Yeah.
okay. Hey, how you doing? I'm checking in this week. Da 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 da. It's always good to check on friends, check on relatives, check on people. Just make sure everyone's okay.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, if anyone listening to this podcast gets one thing from this episode, I think wellness checks, like Crystal just mentioned, is so, so important. And like, I don't know, sometimes I think like, "Oh, I don't want to like reach out to this random friend and ask how they're doing. Like, I don't want to be annoying, or they're probably really busy." But honestly, I'm sure they probably appreciate that check-in way more than we even realize.
Exactly. And sometimes we just end up having a crazy conversation, having fun, having a blast together as friends.
Exactly. Yeah. So definitely, reach out to the people in your life, that you care about, your loved ones, family, friends, even if it's, a friend that you haven't spoken to or, texted with or whatever for like a year or a couple of years, just reach out. Hey, how's it going? How have you been? Thinking of you, hope all is well or whatever. Something as quick and easy as a text like that, like Crystal said, that could lead to having a good time going, catching up, for lunch or something or coffee and having a great time reminiscing on good memories or, creating new memories. So definitely just, you know, interact and connect and check in on those people.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
Awesome. So I through this conversation, I was thinking of something and I don't know if this might be like a controversial topic. I don't know. So, feel free to answer or not answer to your comfort level. But as an educator, something that I was thinking of is just like I feel like within the recent years, it's unfortunately been a tough situation with some violence occurring in schools, where there's kind of like this potential safety risk, that some individuals might feel going to school, whether it's the students or families that are sending their kids to schools. Like, do you think that as a school in 2022, like we need to add more safety precautions to it, or like, I mean, is it fair to say that it might be kind of a scary time to add a physical school these days?
Well, I have to report to a physical school daily.
Uh huh.
There just have to be safety precautions put in place
Okay.
at each school. Generally, that is done by the administrative staff, school boards, before we even return back to school, and they kind of review all those policies and procedures with us.
Mm-hmm.
Most schools have a plan in place. If there is an invader in the school or a perpetrator comes into the school, and that's kind of why we keep our students in uniform so we can identify
Mm.
someone out of uniform entering a building. And there should be plans in place. And
Okay.
yes, you may have to bring in additional security or, law enforcement personnel and so forth. That is the society that we live in today, unfortunately.
Yeah. It is unfortunate. I mean, not to say that, things weren't potentially like this when you were a student or when I was, but it just feels like, these days, just again with everything going on in the world, it just seems like things have just changed so much, and maybe things that like I even took for granted, when I was younger as a student. It's just like it's just a different world we're living in now.
Exactly. It's different, quite more challenging.
Mhm.
One just has to be on their P's and Q's and watch their back, so to speak, and just stay careful, stay prayerful, and each day, embrace your loved ones when you're leaving. You never know if you're going to make it back in the society that we live in today. You just can't take for granted. In the past, we would leave home and say, "See you later," "See you this afternoon," but
Mhm.
now it's kind of like, "Let me say I love you," because you
Yeah.
just never know what's going to happen out here in today's society. So you have to be, like I said, prayerful and careful.
Prayerful and careful. I like that. So, Crystal, something that I've had friends talk to me about, or like I've had this conversation too, is like the idea of, I'm 26 right now, so I'm in my mid 20s. A lot of my peers, are in the same age range, and a common topic is like, oh man, I wish in high school we learned how to, I don't know, change a tire, or how to, pay off a mortgage or, all these things that are kind of more so like life skills. And I hear the argument of like, "Oh, when am I ever gonna use, the quadratic formula? I'd rather, know these life skills." Do you think that that's something that, like, should be incorporated more so into, like, curriculums? Or do you think, like, the academic piece is, just solely to help kind of the mind academically, and the life skills kinda just comes from
Well,
living and learning?
okay. Well, I somewhat laughed because my students were having this exact conversation
Yeah.
last week.
Okay.
And they were like, well, why do we have to learn such and such? When are we going to use this after we graduate? They were
Yeah.
having this conversation. But
Okay.
a lot of schools in restructuring curriculum, and when I was earlier mentioning about the paradigm shift in
Yeah.
education, a lot of schools are already taking a look at life skills and
Okay.
real life things that students will be once they graduate. Because my students like, well, we want to learn how to fill out tax forms.
Yeah.
We want to learn how to do this. I need to know such and such. And he's like, when will I read this story again once I graduate? And I'm like, okay, okay, okay. And they really are, many schools now are implementing things that students can use beyond high school for that
Okay.
transition into the real world, the matriculation to college. Things are being put in place. So
Okay.
they're already slowly coming back. Some in some school districts it never left. They had like VOTEC schools where you went
Mhm.
to vocational tech courses so that you could be best prepared. But it's coming back. It's transitioning back.
Okay. Awesome. And, as someone like yourself who, of course, has a lot of education, you've invested in your education, you have done a lot for that, and myself as well. Whether it's for me getting my bachelor's, getting my master's, I've always valued education. Something that it feels almost like maybe my generation or maybe the generation, after mine is kind of taking on a perspective of like, you don't have to go to college, or like education's not everything. Like, you can learn how to run a business just by watching videos on YouTube, or, reading books about entrepreneurs or successful business people. Do you think that like going to school or getting that formal education still carries as much weight as it used to? Or do you think that like people are finding alternate ways to learn that don't involve a classroom?
People are finding alternate ways that
Okay.
really don't even involve a classroom. Some of my students who may have found high school challenging are quite successful today. Some are movie producers,
Mm.
some are top of the line in their career, some are top officers in the military.
Oh,
School was just not their cup of tea, but they are doing superb in society today, doing quite well. And I guess when I take a look at the transition and the shift of education, I'm just like, why do we limit ourselves to grades? Why are we A, B, C, D, E, F? For what? A grade does not define one's actual ability and level of intelligence. It doesn't.
right.
Not at all.
Mm. So that really kind of evoked the thought of like, what do you think would be better than having, grading system to that almost like it's like as a student, like the grade that you get almost you think determines your worth, or, how successful you will be. Like, do you have any suggestions on alternate ways of incorporating just kind of that with education?
I mean, it would want, but it's not necessarily going to happen.
Mhm.
And I know in some other countries, I don't even think they use grades in some other countries. I just
Right.
wish we could just teach students to take a look at their gift, look at their callings, develop whatever they're gifted in, and let them
Mm.
go from there. I kind of try to figure out why do we just shuffle. I know we need to know other skills. Yes, we need to know how to measure. We should know how to read and write. But why does one have to be graded in doing so?
Yeah.
Why can't we just teach? Just teach and instruct and help them to learn and grasp that concept, to master that concept, and let's move on. This student may be artistic, let them draw. This student may be technologically advantage. Let them work with technology. This one is good in chemistry. This one's good in math. Develop that gift. And I think our society would be so different. And I
Yeah.
think, kind of like you said, kids sometimes feel like they're defined by a grade. You have a good student to come in there and they're all happy, and then they see a paper with a D or a F on it, and it just sometimes kills and destroys the whole spirit
Yep.
within that child. They like, I don't want to learn. I'm getting nothing but D's and F's. And it's just like, what can be put in place to eradicate that? What can be put in place?
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's a $1,000,000 question, right? Like if we had an answer, things could be a lot different. But I loved what you said about kind of meeting students where they're at. If a student is gifted in a specific area, like why can't we focus on helping them shape and sharpen and utilize that gift? But I totally understand that like if you have 30 students and each student has a different gift, like you're one, educator, you can't necessarily focus on each individual's different gift. Like you have to, I guess, just teach to the masses, not necessarily teach to the individual, if that makes sense. But I think if
Yes.
we could do that, that'd be just create a different society, like you mentioned.
Well, I guess that's where in my head I see this whole new curriculum with teachers who are good in art. Put the students
Hmm.
with those teachers. The students are good in math, or the teachers who are just gurus in math. Put the students with those teachers. The students, teachers who are good in chemistry. Put the chemistry students with those teachers, and go from there. That way, I wouldn't have to teach 30 different subjects, but I would work
Right.
in my area of gift and
Yeah.
talent.
I like that. I think that's a really good idea. And now, like maybe this idea is part of it, and we've kind of mentioned, and or I guess you've mentioned the paradigm shift of education. But I guess just whether it's maybe reiterating those points, or if you have additional thoughts that you want to expand on, what do you think like the future of education, at least in this country, the U.S., looks like moving forward? Whether that's 5, 10 years down the road, like what do you think the future of education here would be like?
Honestly, Zach, I have no idea because I
Okay.
never saw it getting to this point. I think it's going to remain very technologically driven.
Okay.
I don't know what they're going to do when it comes to state assessments. We test our students
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit. And I don't know what they do with the data actually, but review it and come up with a new test, a new
Right.
assessment for our babies. And I just don't know. I don't know what's going to happen to education, not in the United States or even abroad. I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know if we're going to end up at home and just have homeschooling and education will be done from a home setting. It's just kind of fizzling. It's not the same structure that it once was in education. I don't know. I think people are really working hard to try and figure it out. And
Mhm.
with the virtual transition piece, I think they thought it was going to kind of work different being
Yeah.
virtual, but I don't think things were really just laid out on the table saying, hey, this is what one needs to do, this is what one needs to do. And if they go back and revisit the virtual piece, it could work. It could work. But we have to wait and see. We have to wait and see.
Yeah. That makes sense, and I think that, with technology and the virtual capabilities, it definitely opens up a lot of opportunity, but at the same time, like, I think of, um, individuals that I know who have been homeschooled, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with homeschooling or anything. I think that just for me, I'm just very grateful that I wasn't homeschooled. Like, I went to a physical school all my life where I was able to, in addition to learning academic skills, I learned a lot of socialization and life skills just from being surrounded by kids my age and learning how to interact, and even as simple as like share and take turns and stuff like that. And I think
Mhm.
that if we go like to a digital landscape where you have these young children who are just staring at a screen all day, and I guess maybe interacting with their fellow students over, video call, you're missing a lot of that like socialization that I truly think kids need to have and learn from.
Socialization is very important because that's what you need in the society that we live in.
Mhm.
But what I do find interesting, a lot of our students who have been homeschooled are like stellar when it comes to education. They have like the
Mm.
highest SAT, like some of them have scored perfect on SAT and
Wow.
ACT test. They have like 4.0 GPAs. They are some of the smartest students in the nation, the ones
Mm.
that have been homeschooled. That has been the interesting piece. Mine is, we could somehow squeeze in the socialization
Yeah.
factor. They would be like geniuses,
Yeah.
perfection in society.
Out of curiosity, do you, like, know of why students who've been homeschooled, like, do seem to be that academically accomplished? Like, is it just, like, the homeschool curriculum, or is, like, there a factor that you think is contributed to that?
I I really don't know, other than they have nothing else really to do but focus
That's
on
true.
the work.
Yeah.
They don't have the distractions. So that's the only
Yeah.
thing I can figure.
Yeah, that's kind of where my head was at, but I was just really curious because I mean, when you said that, I was like, "That makes sense." I haven't really, like, stopped to think about that. Okay. So, one of the last questions that I wanted to ask you, Crystal, and kind of get your thoughts on is you've been an educator, like you said, for almost 30 years. And I feel like when I was in high school and early college and stuff, I feel like I had a lot of peers who wanted to be an educator and wanted to go into teaching. And even I was one of those individuals who I always thought I was going to be a teacher. And fast forward to today, I feel like, and maybe this is what you mentioned with the shortage and just all the transitions, it seems like teaching isn't as a common of an answer that I'm hearing from people around my age about what they want to go into. Do you have like any advice to someone who might be considering a career in education, but they're like, I don't know, maybe it's changed or maybe it's not the same as it used to. Do you have any advice?
Well, my advice is make sure you have a passion for
Okay.
children or young people. Make sure you have a passion for young children and the youth. Know that you're going to have to deal with different personalities and different environmental backgrounds when dealing with today's generation of school students.
Mhm.
And finally, I would say get a balance. That's one thing that did Pride Wayne State in. They gave us a semester you spent in an actual urban setting, and then the semester you were in a suburban setting. Get some balance and the proper training to come into the industry. It's not a flat profession. You just can't just. I don't like how some states just bring teachers in. Just we're going to hire you off the street. It does not work like that. Dealing with the personalities and the mindsets of other people, the proper training for this particular profession. And that's kind of my advice to anyone who is considering coming into the educational profession.
Perfect. I think that's great advice. And yeah, I love that, the idea of finding that balance and making sure that you're properly prepared. I think that that can really pay dividends and make a huge difference in someone's, journey and experiences. So definitely something important.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's how
Awesome.
I have survived almost 30 years, having that balance.
Yeah. That passion, clearly. You clearly have the passion for it, which makes all the
Yes.
difference.
I love all my former students, current students, and oh boy, I have enjoyed. It has been a very rewarding and continues to be a rewarding profession.
I love that. That makes all the difference. And I just think back to a lot of the educators that I've had throughout my life, whether it was in middle school, high school, college, grad school. I've had some fantastic educators who have truly made an impact on me. And I think that, for you, Crystal, being an educator, even if your students don't tell you in the moment or even after the fact, like you truly are having a profound impact on these kids' lives. And I just think, again, back to my professors and teachers who have impacted me. And maybe I didn't even realize it then. Maybe it took me 10 years to realize, like, wow, I really learned more than just, academic lessons. I learned some life lessons from these individuals. So it truly sounds like it is something that really can be rewarding. I just, you and all the educators out there, because I know how much of an impact you can have on my life, but also students' lives in general.
Yes, and it's just rewarding when your students, sometimes they don't get it when they have you as a
Hmm.
student in the building, but once they graduate and they get out here in the real world, some of them will come back to you years later and say, "Oh, I see what you meant."
Yeah.
And they'll share their life stories and say, "I just wish you had just, really knocked it into me."
Right.
And but that's the rewarding part of being an
Yeah.
educator, watching your students get out into to society and actually grow.
Definitely. I love that. So, Crystal, to anyone that's listening who has really enjoyed this conversation, or you mentioned some voice work that you've done and are still doing, is there any like place where people can maybe check out some of your voice work or stay connected with you, or, you know, reach out to if they have questions about education or being an educator? Is there anything like a website or, professional portfolio or anything that you have that you want to share?
Well, I am actually on Instagram,
Okay.
and I have just been enjoying, and I'm just trying to go back. And I rarely use my Instagram myself, but I am the Voice One
Okay.
on Instagram, or they can find me under AKA the Voice One. And they also can dial my business number, which is 313-780-3211, and they can reach me that way. And I will be having some more postings forthcoming, so they will be able to find that out once I actually start uploading things to the actual Instagram account. And I'm going to be beginning to start load things on LinkedIn. It's just some little baby steps that I am beginning to take to transition back into the voice work.
Okay.
My last almost 30 years have been spent in education.
Mhm.
So this is kind of a little baby crawl step to return back to where I first started.
Perfect. Awesome. So I will also put everything Crystal just mentioned, her professional phone number, the Instagram, LinkedIn, all that stuff in the description of the episode. So if you didn't catch Crystal say it, you can just go down to the description and find all of her, contact information or social media there, so you can connect and just let her know that you enjoy the conversation, connect, ask questions, whatever interests you. Definitely reach out to Crystal that way. But as we're wrapping things up, is there any last thoughts, words, message that you want to leave to the people listening?
I just want to just tell them to, as I stated earlier, be prayerful, be careful, live life to the fullest, enjoy, check on your loved ones, your friends, family, people that you may have not spoken to in a while. And as in one of the actual broadcast pieces that we used to use from a program called Project Wisdom, make it a great day or not. The choice is yours.
Wow. That was a fantastic way to end it. And just like, again, your voice, I feel like the voice just made it even more impactful. So thank you, Crystal, for sharing those words of wisdom and just things that we should keep in the back of our mind as we move through our lives and we grow and develop as members of society. I think is super important. So I've really enjoyed getting to chat with you and to just learn from you and to expand some of my thoughts and just to really just see all that you've accomplished in your life. And I know that this is kind of like you said, the baby steps back into the voice work that you're so passionate about. So I'm really excited for that. And anyone that's listening to this episode, you're gonna hear this voice of Crystals and a lot more things in the future. I can tell you that for sure. But it's been an absolute pleasure, Crystal. Thank you for coming on.
And thank you for having me, Zach. Thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah, definitely, and we'll have to have you come back. Once you officially get back in the voice work, we'll have to hear some updates about how things are going.
Okay, and I always tell my people when they look for the voice, it's TH without the letter E, and then voice, VOICE, the voice. We just drop the E because so many people had that title, so we had to
That
drop
makes
the
sense.
E. So we have the voice, THVOICE, or they can find me on Instagram at AKA the voice one. Now that does have THE in it. So
Okay,
I'll send you that
perfect.
information.
Yes, please do. Awesome.
Okay.
Well, Crystal, also known as The Voice Jackson, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, Zach. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care.
Mhm. Thank you.